Welcome to Hypnotic Authenticity. My name is Chris. I'm a practical, grounded hypnotherapist. I'm based in Switzerland, and this is a space that I have created to foster a genuine sense of inner settling, a place to harmonize with yourself and bring about the improvements to your well-being that, I don't know, maybe perhaps you thought were literally impossible. So my episodes are an invitation to reconnect with all that is alive inside you, to examine the stories that you live your life by, and to maybe soften the edges of what it is that you believe yourself to be in order to create a bigger, broader, more expansive sense of your personal agency and your personal understanding. So I'm going to be talking about identity, about existence, about self-resonance, self-harmony, about authenticity. And that'll all be wrapped up with a sprinkling of hypnosis or guided meditation to help you settle, to help you align and return to yourself. So if you're ready, take a breath and let's begin. Are you suffering from burnout? Exhaustion, complete depletion. Maybe you're not sleeping well. Maybe you're ruminating. Maybe you're obsessing over certain things and it's just got to the point where you're in kind of shutdown. If so, this video is completely for you. And the reason why I'm doing the video is because it was prompted by someone's request, in actual fact, that I saw on social media asking for recommendations for a doctor to help with burnout. Now, anybody who's watched a few of my videos will know that I work in hypnotherapy. I am not a medical doctor, but I do see a lot of people who have elements of burnout or exhaustion or rumination, obsessive thinking, lack of sleep, anxiety, and it all kind of ties together. So I know a lot about psychology and psychotherapy, so I can give you a few pointers in that direction. But I wanted to give the perspective of, well, look, also consider these alternative ways. So I'll kind of tell you what I know. My aim is by the end of watching the video, you will have a sense of optimism, okay? Or if you're just listening to this in the car on a podcast, you will have a sense of a pathway forwards. That's what I'm looking for. This is not just pontificating. I want you to get to the point where you feel reasonably confident that you know how you might get out of this pit of burnout. Notwithstanding the fact, of course, that I don't know who is looking at the video and everybody's circumstances are individual, but there are things that you can bring to bear which appear to be broadly applicable. Okay, so I don't know, but let's begin with a little dream, a little what if, a little wouldn't it be nice to think that. So if you can just imagine what it would be like to have a lightness about you, to have a sense of energy about you, to feel as though you have choices, as though you can actually be free to think what you think, to do what you do, to be what you are, and not have to make excuses, to trust in yourself, to understand the way that you are, to be able to reflect upon that, but also distance yourself a little bit and maybe even get to the point of laughing about it. If any of that would be appealing, then watch on. The reason as I said, that I'm doing this is because somebody asked for a doctor. And I know why people, because, I would do the same. If you're feeling completely out of sorts and you don't know what to do, then you're going to reach out for solutions. And the first thing that you're going to reach out for is something which appears, scientific. It appears rigorous, tested, trustworthy, provable. Most of psychotherapy, if we consider the way that psychotherapy occurs today, it comes from a root of free association, okay, from Freud. But interestingly, Freud's entire construction of free association actually came out from prior experience in hypnosis. So he spent a lot of time with people that were doing scientific experiments within the hypnotic community at the time, Charcot and Hippolyte Bernheim, and spending like years away. This was going on mainly in France at the time. And apparently, the story goes that he wasn't particularly quick in being able to hypnotize people, and therefore it was taking too long. And so he had to come up with something else. And so what he thought was, in order to access the subconscious, rather than doing it through this hypnotic approach, which was taking him too long to do, how about if you excite the imagination? And so he created free association. Apparently, that's kind of the motivation that came behind it. And as time has gone on, we have developed and nuanced that, and a lot of what Freud stood for at the time we've kind of dismissed, and we've come out now these days. We've got cognitive psychological therapies, CBT, um, which is kind of, okay, what is our cognition? What is our perception on our situation? What is our meaning? What meaning are we making from our situation? What is our interpretation of events? Or you can go down the behavioral route, okay? The way to change my perspectives is by doing something different, observing a different result, and coming to a new conclusion, okay? Then you get CBT, which is obviously cognitive and behavioral. And it seems to be reasonably effective in actual fact with certain types of, well, depression more than burnout per se. The other one, which is very useful from a psychotherapeutic perspective, is anything which is interpersonal, because we as individuals, well, we are social beings, right? We understand ourselves from the perspective of that within which we interact, the social sphere within which we interact. And so if you can get a new perspective from a new social environment or an improved social environment, which shaking things up, you come to new conclusions, you have different experiences, and suddenly you can rewrite your stories again. Okay. But with all of those, the useful elements of the psychotherapeutic techniques are when it's active, okay, when you are doing, not when you're thinking, not when you're ruminating, right? If you're burned out and you're exhausted and you are ruminating, well, you tend to focus on the negatives, and where focus goes, energy flows, right? Your brain is a goal seeking mechanism, organism. And so if you look for the negative, you're going to give yourself a goal to find, and therefore you will find the negative. Okay. So the ways that psychotherapeutic techniques work best is when they are engaged in getting you to do new stuff so that you come to new conclusions. Okay. But the other thing which frequently comes alongside that are some kind of drugs, okay, some kind of medication. So I, I'm not a doctor, okay? I cannot give you a clinical opinion on medication. So what I would rather you do is you go and have a look at the evidence yourself. And there's one in particular which I have found illuminating, which is by a doctor in the US called Irving Kirsch. And he has written a book called The Emperor's New Drugs. And it basically kind of tracks the exponential growth, well, really since kind of the 60s, of antidepressants, at the same time that there has been an exponential growth in depression. And the conclusion, or one of the conclusions, the kind of the conclusion that I drew most from what he wrote, is that for a start off, when it comes to scientific appraisal of a drug, we speak in a bell curve of potential outcomes. Yeah, so it tends to come like that. And you kind of generalize. You take a large segment of the population, well, as large as you can. You give half of them the drug. You give the other half a placebo, and then you see what the difference is in the outcome, and you see if that's statistically significant or not. So from an individual's perspective, one thing that is absolutely massive in that is that nobody is the average. We all have an individual experience. So even if the science tells you that on average X happens, in practice, you are going to be anywhere on that spectrum, right? But the main conclusion that he came through is that A, there are numerous side effects to antidepressants, but that their effectiveness is mainly based around the placebo effect. And so then you have to do a toss-up in your mind as to whether the placebo benefit is worth the side effects that can come up. And that's all I'm going to say about antidepressants, because as I say, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a pharmacologist, but I would suggest that you look at some of the data. Okay. The reason I bring that up is because the same guy, Irving Kirsch, talks about hypnosis, hypnotherapy, as the ultimate mega placebo. Okay. So to a certain extent, you, through your mega belief, make yourself better through hypnosis. You shift your story, you shift your worldview, and your body, your emotions, your physiological self follows. You lead yourself in a new way based upon your beliefs. Okay. So how can we do this? When you're burned out, you tend to be focused very strongly on the negative. Okay. I've done another video on willpower, and willpower is a finite resource which you deplete over the course of the day, over the course of your actions that require willpower. So if you're already burned out, if you're already in a state of exhaustion, there's not much willpower in the pot to begin with, never mind when you use it over the course of the day. Okay, because really, what is burnout? It's when you have tried and tried and tried and tried, and you've ignored the messages from your body to a certain extent, and you've pushed more and more and more, maybe for your own goals, maybe to please other people, but for whatever reason, you're trying over and over again, ad infinitum, ad nauseum, until your body takes over and says, enough is enough. What we're doing isn't working. I need to rest. And so you are forced to pay attention, whereas before you were just kind of taking another cup of coffee sort of approach. You were constantly kind of battering through. Now, that's my story of burnout anyway, and I accept that that's just one one of many, many stories. So I apologize if that's not your story, but you get to a certain point where you cannot continue to place the same amount of energy going forward as you have done, because to a certain extent, your body's just kind of taken over and said, stop. Now, when you're at that state, it's very hard to then draw upon resources to give you a positive expectancy. Okay. You're in a state of shock or in a state of exhaustion. You tend to look at what brought you where you are and see the bad in that. And we already know, generally speaking, if if you hear something bad or you think something bad, it typically takes about 6 or 7 good things to counteract that one bad thing. Okay, I don't know if you can relate. Maybe back at school, and you'd been given an appraisal, right? And maybe 90% of the appraisal was so positive. Yes, such and such is good at this and 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 this. But if only they could, and everything that went before is destroyed by the but. Okay, we are a risk management animal. So when you have a weight of negative experience which has led you to where you are today, to pull yourself back to a state of positive expectancy would be like dragging yourself up a sheer cliff, is what I'm saying. It's very, very hard to do. It's very hard to do normally, never mind when you're already in a very, very tough place, you know? So often depression, which is very similar in actual fact to burnout, okay? Because depression is also, it is depressed state as opposed to expressed state. Burnout is when you are depressed. Yeah, so there's a lot of correlations between the two. It's based around a negative expectancy and negative interpretation of whatever it is that you've been on, and a negative self-evaluation conclusion. So the reason why I suggest that hypnotherapy is an effective way to work with someone in burnout is partly because in hypnosis, you can look beyond the critical storytelling part of your mind and consider the rest of you. Now, granted, that's a metaphor, but experientially, that's kind of how it feels. So rather than this chattering part of you that's going over everything that's gone wrong, how exhausted you are and how you're kind of no good, you're not killing that part of you. It's still there, but you are giving room to the rest of you to express yourself and to discover resources inside of yourself that maybe were, well, they were there all along, but they were being suffocated by either by the parts of you that were trying even harder to bring yourself wherever you were before the burnout, or by this kind of critical inner chatter. And when you see everything as personal, it becomes an identity, it becomes a sense of what you are, of what you're capable of what you deserve. And then, as I say, you kind of end up finding more of it. So you find yourself in this situation, okay? But what do you do? All right. And the reason why this person asked for the doctor is because, as I said, the doctor is scientific. The doctor appears robust, rigorous, tested. It's clinical. Yeah, therefore it's trustworthy. Right? Other people do it, so it must be correct. It's got social proof. The alternative, when I'm talking about this thing, this hypnosis thing, is Wild West. Right? It is unregulated. Therefore, in your mind, it is, well, at the very least, unknown, a little bit frightening, perhaps. And that's absolutely valid. But just because there are nonsensical characters out there, let's say, that are professing to do hypnosis, doesn't mean you should throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is a lot of benefit if you can utilize the tool, learn the tool from someone that does it well. So you must do your homework, but don't dismiss it, I guess is what I'm saying. You can even, if you are so inclined, look to the science, look to the proof of what it is about hypnotherapy that works. But you know, basically talk to people that know what they're doing, knowing what they're talking about. I'm going to do a separate video, in actual fact, speaking expressly about how to find a therapist, what it is to look for in finding a therapist that will help you on that journey. But anyway, that's for a separate subject. Okay, so how can, and I appreciate that means I'm now plugging hypnotherapy, but it is what I know most about, so I apologize. How can hypnotherapy work? Burnout or depression, as I said, is a combination of factors, some of which are biological, some of which are physiological, some of which are sociological. They are perceptions of emotions which are fitted into the story that you have about yourself. I said, when you're exhausted, it's impossible to use your willpower because you're not strong enough. Okay, so first thing, why is all of that? Because your sleep suffers. Your sleep suffers enormously. You tend to ruminate over the problems that are going on. You tend to be anxious, scared, powerless, have lost a sense of control, and this tends to come up most of all at night. So, first thing is to reduce that fatigue. Okay, if you're not sleeping well at night, you are compounding the fatigue that the in actual fact that your body kind of said, I need to rest, but then your brain is getting in the way and saying yes but yes but yes but yes but. Brain is trying to solve something that your body has actually taken over. So it's very, very hard to solve that mentally. But that's what tends to happen, and it tends to happen at night. So insomnia is both a symptom of burnout or depression, but it's also a compounding risk factor, let's call it. So, how can you get back on your side so that you can sleep better? Because until you're sleeping better and eating better, your physiology can't begin to rebuild itself. And there are lots and lots of ways of helping to sleep better. But obviously the one that I'm most in love with is hypnosis. So if I can't sleep at night, I in the night put myself into self-hypnosis and I tell myself to sleep and it works. It's, it's one of the most wonderful tools I've ever discovered in my whole life. you basically what we're saying is you need a mechanism, a switch, which allows you to choose to slow down at the time that is right for you, so that when it's nighttime, you are able to curtail your rumination. You're able to compartmentalize the things that you're thinking about so that the problems, you can compartmentalize them, you can put them in a box and you can say, look, in the middle of the night, this is not the best time for me to solve this problem. I need to have a degree of clarity of mind to solve this problem. In order to do that, I need to sleep. So please put this in a box, park it over there, and we'll think about that tomorrow when I've got more energy. That's sort of an approach. Okay, so that you can separate your problem solving time from your sleep time. What that does is it permits you, because you've got um, a more robust physiology because you're well rested, it gives you the ability to build a degree of realism into your life, almost a kind of fatalism, maybe even a sense of cynicism, okay? That life's events are going to occur, but that you can place them into a context, you can understand them, and you can kind of position them in a place. Imagine that your whole body had a perspex box around it that was your filing cabinet, okay? And you have these issues, conundrums, conflicts, problems, which have been weighing down and which seem to be everywhere. And then the noise gets on top of it, and the whole thing is overwhelming, and you sink into this exhaustion. And instead, you take each one of these conundrums or problems or challenges or goals or whatever you want to call it, and you slot it into a particular part of the filing cabinet of this perspex box. What you're doing is you are itemizing and compartmentalizing rather than generalizing. So suddenly it's something that felt like everything is an aspect, it's a part, and you can distance yourself. And when I say that to you, I can feel that in my body. I can actually feel a sense of relief, a sense of release as I put things metaphorically in the story of my mind into a box and put it to the side. When you stop globalizing and you start localizing on your issues, it's it's allowing you to start to understand how you perceive things and how you respond to those things. And rather than them being everywhere in a massive noise of confusion, when you can start to put them into individual boxes and notice how you respond to that, you gain a sense of, well, understanding of yourself, self perception, but also you kind of get a tool for emotional control because you can bring it out of the box when you want and you can put it back in the box when you want. And so you're starting to understand perceptively, experientially, how to more usefully perceive things. You come to have a more accurate appreciation of situations. Okay, you you put things into their correct context, let's say, and you learn from them rather than being triggered into fight, flight, freeze because there's so much going on at the same time. And so you can end up with a sense of self-regulation. Yeah. So you can choose your behaviors. I talk an awful lot in my videos about having a choice, right? That it might take a long time to get to the point where you feel as though you have choices. But the choice itself takes a split second. It takes a single decision, which is instantaneous. And so in so doing, you are enabling yourself to relate better to yourself and to all of you, and to start to understand the strengths that you can draw upon when you wish. Now, someone described, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody described hypnosis as believed in imagination. And that in itself is a hypnotic phrase, okay? Believed in imagination. So you are suspending your disbelief. You are wrapping your mind around a certain idea and going with it, even if another part of you knows that it might not be true. because it's beneficial. Okay. Now, a person in burnout or in depression is doing the same thing. They're also hypnotizing themselves, but in the opposite manner. So they are imagining the negativity, they are imagining all the problems, they are building them up, and they are believing in their story. So, so you can consider depression or burnout as a negative trance as much as you might consider repeating mantras and positive thinking as a positive trance, neither of which are particularly real. The question is, if you can get to the point where you can start to understand yourself, and the whole thing is a story, which stories are you going to draw upon in order to live your life in a way which feels good for you? Which means accepting that actually everything is a bit ambiguous. Nothing is quite as real as we think it is, and that what we think we know, we might be completely and utterly mistaken about. And that's a very difficult thing, okay? And especially when you're suffering from burnout, because the only thing that you're kind of hanging on is your sense of reality. Other stuff is falling around about you, and so you're trying to take a grip on whatever it's possible to control. Right now, I've done another video, in actual fact, on being a control freak, because the only way that you can truly feel in control is when you trust yourself sufficient to actually let go of control, in the knowledge that you can regress the control if you choose to do so, but that you don't need to constantly be in control. So what that means is you need this sense that ambiguity, that what you don't know is part of life, and that you don't have to be right all the time, and you don't need to prove that. You can observe yourself uh, and come to conclusions based around that. Okay, so I don't want to tell you what you should do. All I'm saying is that whatever it is that the rail that you are currently running on, which you kind of tried harder and harder to the point where you ended up exhausted, maybe still feels as though that's what you should be doing. But there are many, many other ways to skin a cat if you're prepared to get out from behind the story that you're currently telling yourself. Most people's inclination when something doesn't work is to do it again, do it more, try harder. Another one of the reasons why I love hypnotherapy is that it gives you a different perspective on yourself. You're listening to the rest of you, and so you can come to new conclusions, because that part of you that's telling you to try harder, well, that's the conscious critical bit, which is just kind of sat in the passenger seat. All of this is giving you, or is aimed at giving you more options, more ideas, more possibilities. Okay. Ambiguity is frightening. Okay. It's not nice. And when you are burned out, or when you are depressed, when there is a lack of clear meaning, then it can be difficult to look at ambiguity in a positive angle. Which, to play the record again, is another good reason why hypnotherapy is very useful. Get out of the story. Because ambiguity is also the potential field. Okay, what you don't know is where, or what you think you don't know, or where you are not currently shining your torch and looking, is probably where the solution lies. So in order to do something different, there is an element of you that needs to embrace the unknown. Okay. I talk a lot about having leverage. Okay. A lot of people only find the leverage to do the things which are unknown, which are uncomfortable, is when the alternative is so painful. Okay. Now, for me, burnout and depression means continuing down the route that I'm going is painful. It is very, very painful. And therefore, I must do something different, even if doing something different is unknown. Yeah. Because that's where all the potential is. That's where learning, experience, newness, difference is going to come from. So you might want to ask yourself what it is about ambiguity that is so uncomfortable and lean into it. Okay. Why do you need to be so certain of your conclusion, even if it's incorrect, or even if it potentially leads to further rumination or further exhaustion, for example? Okay, because it's only after accepting ambiguity that you can throw away your rumination. Yeah. And when you throw away the rumination, when you've got these tools that allow you to compartmentalize, then you can sleep better. You can start to look at the world in a different way. You can eat better. You can go outside. You can move your body. You can start to shift your physiology. You can feel better about yourself because you're feeling more in control, more understanding of yourself, more accepting of what it is that you are. And you start to rewrite your story. You start to come to the conclusion that actually you are all right. That actually there's a lot of stuff about you that is really, really good. That even in the pain, there's a lot of really good, juicy, lovable humanity. Because once you can care for yourself, once you can say, you know, I am worth it, I do have a value, I am at my heart a decent person. And to hell with what other people might think. I know that in my heart sort of approach. Well, then you can put yourself first. You can look after yourself. You can care for yourself. And there's no need then to constantly chew over the same problems over and over again. Okay? It's human nature to seek answers. Okay? We are a pattern matching organism, brain. Okay, we use rules of thumb. We haven't got enough brain capacity consciously to examine every single facet of every single problem. And so we create shortcuts which we use to create answers. But the real skill behind it is coming to understand when you are using those rules of thumb, when you are effectively guessing, assuming, making massive assumptions which you come to hang the hooks of your reality upon, and you think you know it. But in actual fact, you're imagining it. And there are many explanations, there are many guesses that you'll never know for sure, that it's all right to be wrong. It's all right to be conflicted. It's all right to be able to say, you know, I don't know. Sometimes, can you imagine the number of times in your life where you wished somebody else, instead of telling you what they thought they knew, they just said to you openly and honestly, you know, I don't know. Can you imagine how much easier life would be if the only information that you got from people was the truth, the rigorously tested truth, rather than their interpretation of what it was, because you could work with that. Yeah. What I'm saying is do that for yourself. So when there are times when you don't know, it's better to not know than to blather about what you think you know and to hang your knowledge on that. Another way you might want to think about it is just consider all the times in your life, and then bound to be some, because it's the way with everybody, where you've been completely and utterly, totally dead wrong, completely and utterly mistaken on something that you were really sure about. Yeah. If that can happen, then it can happen anytime, because that's just the nature of what it is that we want. We chase certainty, we chase understanding. So it's useful, therefore, no matter when these conundrums come up that are pulling you in different directions, yeah, conflicts, paralysis, what could this also mean? What might it be instead? You can say the same thing when you're in a massive argument with someone else, okay? Having a huge heated argument, and you're certain that you're right and you're certain that they're wrong, okay? And there is no benefit from that whatsoever. One of the easiest ways is to just say to yourself, is there 5% of what this person that I completely disagree with, is there 5% of what they're saying that could be right? Because normally there is, right? If there wasn't any element of what they were thinking that wasn't right, then they wouldn't be defending their position, right? It's all getting back to understanding yourself, knowing how you come to the conclusions that you do, that they're based on an awful lot of experiences that have brought you to where you are today, but that your interpretation is a choice. And the things that you have concluded, although they feel just like you, they're only one of a myriad of yous. Yeah. I think I'll stop there. Okay. If that resonates, fair enough. Go check out a multitude of different techniques. Okay, go and indeed talk with a doctor. It's important to check out physiological, emotional, mental, biological causes. Absolutely. But also consider what it is which is creating your conclusions, which are driving the way that you think and act. Okay? We all have inside of us the required experiences to get ourselves out of the situation that we're currently in. We have the personal resources. Everybody has the personal resources inside of themselves, even if it's only that they read it in a book or saw it on a film, right? But we've all had experiences that we've learned from. It just depends upon where you shine your light, where you're focusing. What are you looking at? Okay? When you're burned out, when you're exhausted, when you're in a state of fear or depression, it's likely that you are unaware how to retrieve those resources. And so that's basically what I do. I help people to rediscover everything that is wonderful inside of them. I don't really do anything. I am the guide. I help them feel secure. I help you, I want to make it personal, feel strong enough to discover yourself so that you become you. You become a true multidimensional person that you like, that you relate to, that you feel an affinity and a thankfulness, a gratitude, a peace with. And I know it sounds weird, but it's already inside of you. And so the process appears revelatory. It appears almost like a rebirth. It appears exhilarating when it occurs, because you're throwing away this bag of bricks which is sat on your back and feeling free, feeling that you can expand your chest and breathe and look almost in a childlike fashion at what you thought you knew. So it feels new, it feels wild, it feels totally alive when it occurs. But after a while, what you come to conclude is that actually you were just off track. And you're now remembering yourself. And you're actually coming home to yourself, to the essence of what you kind of always were, somehow, inexplicably. And with that sense of coming home, the sky's the limit. All right, thanks for watching or listening, and I hope that's of comfort. I hope it gives you some pointers if you are experiencing burnout. If you've watched the video and you've been if you've been through this sort of experience and you've pulled yourself out, I would love you to write some comments and explain and express your experience, because that'll be really, really useful for people that are going through this. See if what I'm talking about resonates, or if you've got a completely different perspective. That's absolutely fine too. I hope I've done the one thing which I set out to do, which is to give you a path, a belief that it is possible and realistic and safe to pull yourself out from where you are and live again. Give yourself permission to rediscover joy and peace and certainty and acceptance and solidity, credibility, authenticity, all those wonderful things. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If it resonates with you, then follow my podcast. I would also personally be really grateful if you might wish to leave a quick rating. It genuinely helps others to discover the podcast. If you personally would like more guided meditations, you want some deeper insights, you'll find all my links in the description. If you prefer a more visual boost, then you might want to check out my YouTube channel called Authentic Life Hypnosis. And if you're looking to do some deeper work that goes beyond one-way audio, then obviously you're very welcome to reach out. Equally, if you have any questions, I'm here to help. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.